5 Creepy Horror Stories. 1. The Room That Watches. The Room That Watches. Ethan had always been an insomniac. He told himself it was stress, too much caffeine, or maybe just bad habits. But the truth was, something about his apartment never let him sleep. At night, as he lay in bed, he could feel the sensation of being watched. It started subtly, a creak in the floorboards when he wasn't moving, a shift in the shadows when the lights were off. He told himself it was just his mind playing tricks. But then the feeling became stronger. He would wake up gasping for air, the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on his chest. One night, he set up his phone to record as he slept. The next morning, he hesitated before pressing play. At first, it was just darkness and silence. Then, at around 3:12 a.m., a faint rustling, and then his blanket shifted, as if something had moved underneath it. But Ethan never moved. Terrified, he decided to stay up and watch the room himself. Hours passed in silence. Then, in the dim glow of his nightlight, he saw it. His closet door, which he was certain had been shut, was now slightly ajar. A sliver of blackness stared back at him from the gap deeper than the shadows of the room. His breath itched. He reached for his phone, but as he did, the door creaked open a fraction more. Something was there, watching. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The next day, he called a locksmith and had the closet door sealed shut. But the feeling of being watched never left. If anything, it became worse, no matter where he stood in his apartment. He felt unseen eyes peering at him from just beyond his vision. Then, one night, as he turned over in bed, he saw it. The closet was still sealed, but in the reflection of his bedroom mirror, the door was wide open, and inside, something smiled. The last thing Ethan remembered was the feeling of cold breath against his neck before the darkness swallowed him whole. The Man in the Attic. The Man in the Attic. David had always been skeptical of ghost stories. That changed the night he moved into his new apartment. It was a modest place in an old building, the kind that creaked with every shift in the wind. The landlord had mentioned something about the attic being off limits, but David hadn't paid much attention until he started hearing the noises. Every night, at exactly 2:47 a.m., there was a slow, deliberate dragging sound above his bedroom ceiling, like something heavy being pulled across the wooden floor. One night, unable to ignore it any longer, he grabbed a flashlight and pulled down the attic ladder. The air was thick with dust, the scent of mold clinging to the wooden beams. He swept the flashlight around, illuminating stacks of old furniture covered in sheets. Then the beam landed on something that made his breath catch in his throat. A single wooden chair sat in the middle of the attic, and on it, a man. He was tall and impossibly thin, his skin stretched too tight over his bones. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, as if his neck had been broken. His hollow eyes stared directly at David. Then he smiled. David stumbled back, nearly falling down the ladder. But as he turned to flee, the attic hatch slammed shut above him. He sprinted to the door, only to find it locked. A whisper brushed against his ear, cold as ice. "I've been waiting." The lights flickered, When they came back on, the attic hatch was wide open and the chair was empty. 3. The Curse of the Eyeless Ma. The Curse of the Eyeless Man. Just outside a small town, there was an ancient forest where the mist never seemed to fade. The locals called it Silent Hollow, but this hollow was known not only for its eerie stillness, but also for the dark legend it concealed. According to the tales, the spirit of a man who had vanished years ago still roamed within its depths. They called him the Eyeless Man. As the story goes, one night the man wandered into the forest and was never seen alive again. Days later, his corpse was found tied to a tree, his eyes gouged out. But the strangest part, his eyes were never found. From that night on, those who dared to walk the forest paths after dark would hear slow, deliberate footsteps following them. Yet when they turned around, no one was there. Some claimed they had glimpsed a shadowy figure with hollow sockets where eyes should have been. Others reported hearing whispers, low, breathy murmurs. But the most terrifying detail, the whispers always spoke their names. Over time, the hollow was abandoned entirely, but thrill-seekers and skeptics still ventured in, hoping to disprove the legend. The rumors said that if you stood beneath a certain tree at midnight, you would start to hear the footsteps. If you followed them, your vision would begin to blur, and you would hear your name being called. If you didn't turn back in time, you would never return at all. As the number of disappearances increased over the years, the townspeople decided to seal off the forest. The entrances were barricaded, warning signs were posted. Yet some say that on the stillest nights, when even the wind refuses to stir, whispers still drift from within the hollow. And if you listen too closely, you might just hear slow, heavy steps behind you and feel the weight of unseen, empty eyes watching. 4. The Unseen Guest. The Unseen Guest. David had always been skeptical about the supernatural. Growing up in a modern city, he never entertained thoughts of ghosts, demons, or ancient curses. That changed the night he stayed at his grandmother's house, a place no one had lived in for years. The house was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by thick woods. Its history was riddled with tragedy his grandmother used to warn him never to stay there alone. There are things in that house, she used to say, things that don't belong to this world. He never believed her until that night. As he settled in, an unsettling feeling crept over him. The silence was too heavy, the darkness too thick. Still, he brushed it off and lay down in bed. Then came the whispers, faint, almost like the wind, but distinct, murmuring, guttural, and in a language he didn't recognize. He sat up, his body covered in goosebumps. Something moved in the corner of the room. His breath caught on his throat. The air grew dense, almost suffocating. He reached for his phone, but the screen flickered and died. A low, inhuman laugh echoed from the hallway. He shot up and ran to the door, but it slammed shut on its own. The room was ice cold now, his breath visible in the air. Then the whispers stopped. Silence, a deep and natural silence. Then knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the inside of his closet door. David froze. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his body refused to move. The closet door creaked open. Nothing but blackness inside. A void darker than the night itself, and from within, the red eyes blinked open. The last thing David heard before his mind shattered was a voice, not a whisper, but a growl, ancient and hungry. "You invited me in," and then the darkness swallowed him whole. 5. The Stranger in the Mirror. The Stranger in the Mirror. Ethan moved into an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town, unaware that he was making the biggest mistake of his life. The place was dirt cheap, and the previous owner had seemed oddly desperate to get rid of it. But Ethan didn't care. He wanted peace and solitude. The house still had some old furniture covered with dust and sheets. But the most striking piece was the massive mirror standing right across from the bed in the master bedroom. Its frame was tarnished, and the glass had a cloudy, eerie look. As Ethan stared into it, an uneasy feeling crawled up his spine. It felt off, like the reflection wasn't entirely his. The first night went by without incident, but in the early hours of the morning, he woke up to a faint tapping sound. His eyes drifted to the mirror. His reflection was sitting up in bed while he was still lying down. His blood ran cold. The reflection's eyes were vacant, its skin pale. Ethan blinked rapidly, and suddenly the reflection was normal again. "Just a dream," he muttered to himself, trying to shake off the lingering fear. But the next night, it happened again, only this time the reflection smirked at him. It was an awful grin to white, to knowing. The reflection tilted its head, hands resting on its knees, and opened its mouth. No sound came out, but Ethan could feel it speaking to him. Panicking, he threw a bedsheet over the mirror. That night the whispering began. "Ethan, Ethan, let me in." The voice slithered into his ears like a snake. He clenched his eyes shut, covered his ears, and curled up under the blankets. But the whispers didn't stop until morning. The next day he decided to remove the mirror, but no matter how hard he tried, it wouldn't budge. It was like it was rooted in place. Then his reflection moved again. This time it stood up on its own. It no longer mimicked him. It locked eyes with Ethan and slowly grinned. Then it started walking toward him. Ethan bolted out of the room, but as he ran through the house, mirrors started appearing everywhere. In the bathroom, the kitchen, the hallway, and in every mirror, his reflection was coming for him. By the time he reached the front door, a giant mirror materialized above it. His reflection leaned in close and whispered in his ear, "You can't leave." The door slammed shut, and at that moment, the reflection stepped out of the mirrors. The next morning, Ethan was gone. But if you looked into the mirrors, you could see him, trapped inside, screaming, and outside, a man who looked like Ethan walked freely under the sun, but he wasn't Ethan anymore.